All right, lab problem C, the warm drink. This is based on an actual study and it worked, which is pretty cool. Okay, so here you have a simple study, and there's a researcher that gets participants to either carry a warm drink in their hands or, in the control condition, to carry a room temperature drink. And then later, they have to rate how warm they found a person that they were reading a description of. Okay, so our independent variable, I've just labeled IV, but that would be the experimental condition. And then the DV is the rating of the other person that they're reading about. So the IV is going to have to take on some different values. So it's going to take on either 1 is the control or 2 is the experimental. And as always, you're changing the decimals to 0 unless I gave you something that had decimal values. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is generate some frequency tables. So I'm going to go to Analyze, Descriptive Frequencies, and I'm just going to go ahead and move over the IV and the DV. And I'm going to then go to the statistics, and as always, ask for the mean, median, the mode, and the standard deviation. And then when I hit OK, it'll give me my little statistics table, and it'll give me the frequency table for the independent variable, the control, and the experimental, and it's showing that I have 10 people in each group. And then I get the frequency table for the dependent variable. So this is the ratings that the individuals gave for how warm they found the person when they read a description of them. So you see the values that come out there. Okay, so that's 1, and you needed to say what percentage of students were in the experimental and the control conditions. So there were 50% in the control and 50% in the experimental. And what percent of the ratings were 3 or lower? Well, here's my 3. I come over to the cumulative percent, and it looks like 75% were at 3 or lower. Okay, and then we got to go on to graph. C2 asks you to graph the frequency distribution of the dependent variable. So I'm going to go up to Graphs, Legacy Dialog, and come down to histogram. And then for histogram, I'm going to just graph the dependent variable. So I move that in there, and I hit OK. And here we have what vaguely looks like an obscene gesture. That's just an accident. So the dependent variable ranges from 1 to 5, with a good number of people scoring at 3. So you'd want to just quickly sketch this in the space in your lab. Okay, question 3, do an error bar for the dependent variable grouped into cases by the IV. So I got to go to Graphs, Legacy, Error, and it's like the previous ones, it's a summary of groups of cases. So in this case, I'm going to do the DV and group them by the IV, which is the experimental condition. And I'm going to remember to change the standard deviation, change the bars to standard deviation with a multiplier of 1, and then hit OK. And there I have my error bars graph. So I'm comparing the control and the experimental. And remember, with the error bars, you always have the mean is represented by the circle, and then this is 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below the mean for the two of them. So it looks like the experiment, it looks like it works. People in the experimental condition, they're giving higher ratings of warmth for the person they read about. So it looks like holding something warm did affect their general outlook on things. Okay, so moving on, question 4, C4. Calculate the overall mean, median, mode, and standard deviation for the dependent variable. You might remember we've already got that information up here when we did our frequency table. So the mean, median, mode for the standard deviation for the dependent variable are right there, so you can use that information for question 4. And then question 5, it asks you to compare the means use compare means to compare the two conditions. Report the mean and standard deviation for each group. So now I'm going to go up to analyze, compare means. The independent variable is going to go, shockingly, in the independent variable box. Dependent variable in the dependent box, and I hit OK. And then I get my little table where I can see that the people in the control group didn't give as high of rating for warmth, the dependent variable, as those in the experimental group. So I can summarize that little table. That was 5. Then C6, it says what condition produced the higher ratings of the described person? That would be the experimental condition. So you can answer that. And then which condition had the highest variability? That's a trick question because they are the same. So there's no difference in the variability. They have the exact same one. So you can just say neither. They were the same. And that's it. That is it for lab number 1. I hope you enjoyed. Lab number 2 will be even more exciting.